Hi. Today I want to talk about something that I did this past weekend, but for that to make sense, our story has to start about 45 years ago or so in the past. Now, a really quick disclaimer is the the first part of the story I'm about to share. I had actually posted it maybe about a week and a half ago as a standalone long form video, as this has been on my mind a lot lately. But apparently, either the subject matter or the title or something caused YouTube to basically shadow ban it, where they were not recommending that video to viewers like they do my other ones. And I ended up getting something like, I think, 2 unique views. Uh, since they weren't really pushing the impressions for that video, I suspect that those two viewers were probably subscribers. So if you do happen to be one of those two people who actually watched that video before I yanked it, then just one, thank you for watching it, but two, bear with me. The telling this time won't be quite as detailed as it was in that standalone video. Okay, so as I mentioned, our story begins about 45 years ago or so. I was 9 years old, and I decided that I was going to summon the devil. Now, that may sound weird given my age, but you got to understand that's just the way my mind is wired. Even back then, I was obsessed with all things paranormal, supernatural, witchcraft, magic. I just greedily devoured every book I could find on the subject. I'm not sure where that came from because at the time I was born and lived most of my life smack dab in the heart of the Bible Belt in a very small, unincorporated rural community in West Virginia along the banks of the Elk River. Um, my weeks as a kid were earmarked by church. 3 times a week we went to church with the occasional baptism at the river or tent revival thrown in for good measure. And of course, you had a week of vacation Bible school in the summer with all the marching and singing and fun little projects. So, as you can imagine, summoning the devil is not exactly something that the tabernacle would put upon their list of recommended activities, especially if you're a kid. Um, I can't really say why I wanted to summon the devil. There's there wasn't any pressing questions that I wanted to ask. And I certainly didn't want to sell my soul. I was a bookish child and read a lot. I mean, a lot. So I knew that deals with the Prince of Darkness, that they always went askew because he would find a way to renege on the pact without actually violating its terms. And basically, you would be fucked. And I didn't want that. I took my immortal soul very seriously, very seriously. I can't even say that, excuse me, I can't even say that I wanted to do it just to see if it would work, because even back then, for as long as I can remember, I had always been a true believer in the power of magic. There was no doubt in my mind that this would work. So I guess basically boils down to that, as strange as it sounds, it's just something that I wanted to do. So I the supplies I needed were a mirror, which I got a makeup mirror that was hidden underneath our bathroom sink, that neither my mom or older sister used at all. I got I think it was a red candle from our emergency candle drawer because, like I said, it was rural West Virginia. This was back in late 70s, early 80s, and we were prone to lose power during heavy storms. So we had emergency candles. I got a blue tip strike anywhere kitchen match that came in those big boxes. The last thing I needed was sand, and so I got the sand from a local swimming hole. Now, the night came that I had decided to do this ritual. By the way, I read about this ritual in one of my books, in case you're wondering where I got all this from. But the night came for me to do the ritual, and I didn't, at that time, I didn't know about planetary timing and moon phases and what have you. So it was basically just a day that was picked at random. And so laying in bed, pretending to sleep, listening to the sounds of the house. My sister Lori, she had a slightly later bedtime than I did. So eventually I heard her stereo go off and that settled down in her room. I could still hear the muffled television from mom and dad's room, but eventually that quieted too. And then it was just the usual sounds of the house settling. Now, back then, you could get these little, flimsy plastic wristwatches and bubblegum machine for a quarter. And they had like a little LCD display screen, and there were two metal nubs at the top. And if you press those little metal nubs, then it would illuminate the screen very dimly, but it's still enough to see the numbers, even if they were faint. So I laid there in bed because the book that I had read had said that this has to be performed at the exact stroke of midnight. Cool. When I started approaching midnight, I had my supplies ready and I wiggled out my bedroom window. We had a very, very small elementary school beside our house. It was really before they really started consolidating schools. So, I think maybe there were 10, 11 kids in my class, maybe at any given time. Anyhow, on the other side of the elementary school, there was what we called the swinging bridge, even though it didn't actually swing, it just kind of more bounced when you went across it. That led over to what used to be Elk Refinery, where my dad had worked. It was an oil refinery, which had since gone out of business and was abandoned. Now, if you've never spent any amount of time in the country, then, excuse me, you probably don't realize exactly how dark it can get when you're away from the light pollution of cities. But it gets very dark. Really, the only lights I had as I was walking with my little sack of ritual supplies were, these basically little floodlights that were here and there on that swinging bridge I mentioned. Get to the other side of the bridge. I walk up these railroad tracks that had ceased to be useful once the refinery went out of business. And I came to this bridge that spans a tributary of the Elk River, and it really borders what we called in the local dialect Falling Rock Holler, which, people writing it would be writing it hollow. I went down underneath the bridge. There was a protected area down there where no one would see me. I had some privacy to do my ritual. I set the mirror up against a rock, put the pile of sand in front of it, put the candle in the pile of sand, and grabbed my blue tip match and watched my little watch and waited for the stroke of midnight. Now, what was supposed to happen here is when I lit the candle at the stroke of midnight, I was supposed to see the devil's face in the mirror staring back at me. So I'm counting down the minutes. It's getting closer and closer, closer, and then finally, at midnight, I strike my match and I touch it to the wick. Now, what happened at this point? I'll go into a little bit more theory about this here in a moment. What happened at this point is it seemed like as soon as I touched that match to the wick, that the wind just started howling. I mean, howling. And across the river, I heard all these dogs in people's yards, and then like the hound dogs, and they just started braying. And at that point, little 9-year-old me finally lost his damn courage. It scared the shit out of me. I like scrambled out from underneath that bridge, took off running back up the railroad tracks, feeling like something was like chasing me and right behind me, heart pounding. I had stitch in my side, but I knew I couldn't stop because I knew if I stopped, that whatever had come through that mirror was going to grab me. I'm running across the swinging bridge, and as I passed through the like floodlights, for a brief fraction of a second, I kind of felt a little relief and I kind of felt a little safe because I was in the light. But of course, that was fleeting. So basically, what I did, I like went across the darkness like a stone skipping across a lake through pools of light and shadow. Got over to the elementary school, running still, jumped up and hit the chain link fence separating my yard from the school without even stopping, scrambling up it. I'd been up that fence so many times, I knew exactly where the handholds and footholds were that would keep it from sagging back. Got to the top, hurled over it, misjudged my jump, ended up like really banging up my knee pretty bad. I didn't realize it at the time because, my adrenaline was just like, like rushing. I mean, I was really terrified. As soon as I hit the ground, banged my knee, but I immediately popped up, shimmied back up through my window, turned around, closed it as quickly, but still as quietly as I could, because even though I was positive I was being chased by demons, I still didn't want to get in trouble with my mom for sneaking out of the house. Yeah. Anyhow, I jumped into bed, pulled up my Star Wars like sheets and blankets up to probably about my nose, and I laid there in bed watching the shadows and silhouettes of the tree branches like swaying in the wind outside and casting shadows on my wall. And I pretty much stayed like that for the rest of the night. I didn't really get any sleep that night. The main thing which kept me awake was I was laying there, and it occurred to me that when I chickened out, I left without blowing out the candle. And I thought, well, I left a portal open, allowing, God knows what to cross over and come into this world. And that is what scared me most about this. Now, did I really summon the devil? Adult me would say no, because adult me no longer believes in the devil for various reasons. I think the devil is a tool that the early church fathers invented for purposes of control and power. So no, I don't believe I summoned the devil, but did I summon some sort of dark spirit? Ambiguous. Who's to say? I mean, on the one hand, maybe yes. Maybe like that wind did just suddenly blow up. Maybe the dogs just suddenly did start howling. Or maybe I was so focused on watching my time and prepared for the ritual that those things were present all along, and I was simply too focused. And I didn't notice them until I lit the candle flame and expected something to happen. The jury's out. If you want to let me know what you think in the comments, feel free. So that's the half of this story that had that standalone video that I had to pull. So that ritual actually came back to haunt me multiple times over the course of my life as I grew older. There was a period when I was a teenager in high school where we lost a lot of members of our family, and it was like rapid succession. I mean, we had barely had time to, start coming to terms with, one loss before, we were at another funeral. I mean, it really hit hard, especially because it also, like, one of the incidences it's still kind of hard for me to talk about. So words might be a little more not so flowing here. But it was my aunt, my uncle, um, my three cousins. Oldest cousin Joseph, he was close to my age, not quite as old as me, but pretty close enough that like we hung out together when we were kids and played. Um, Melanie, she was a little younger. She was probably about 9, probably about the age I was when I did my ritual. And then there was little Jennifer, who was only 2 or 3, and they got hit by a drunk driver. And he was driving, basically, it was a lift kit on his truck, so it basically turned, his just regular old pickup truck into a monster truck, and it crushed the doors of the car so they wouldn't open, but it also ruptured the gas tank, causing my family to burn alive. Um, that's actually the deaths which set off this seemingly chain reaction. And it actually, there were so many that I'd always been kind of a little something of a black sheep in the family because of my interest in the, occult and esotericism. But this situation kind of changed all that, and I was asked to sit down at my grandmother's dining room table as the expert. Like I said, I was about 16 at this time, so I mean, was in no way an expert, but at the same time, I did have more knowledge than they did. And anyhow, the whole conversation was a very serious consideration about whether or not our family had been cursed. Now, I didn't share this information with anyone, but through all these deaths, I still had that question. I had a question in the back of my mind: was, did I cause this? Did my attempt at summoning dark spirits into the world come back and harm those I love? Um, I'm just going to leave that there for now. I don't want to go any further into that line of conversation, if that's okay. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that there. Um, One of the things which really helped also solidify that is the general area where I, did that ritual. And locals, people talk, and I would hear rumors of, like, a devil worshiping cult who, met and practiced up Falling Rock Holler, all this weird paranormal stuff. And I mean, granted, it was the 80s, and we were, pretty much getting ramping up for the satanic panic. So how much of that was, just local folklore or urban legend, and if there was any truth to it, I honestly do not know. But those stories stuck in the back of my head because of the proximity to the bridge where I did my ritual. Now, to further, like, latch these things in my mind, underneath that exact same bridge where I tried to summon the devil in 2014, a man who was walking his dog, I don't know the details of how it happened, but he somehow found human remains underneath that bridge. They were skeletonized. And honestly, for a long time, it was a cold case. They didn't know who it was. But just here recently, they've discovered the identity of who that person was. They still don't know, cause of death or if foul play had been involved. But yeah, his skeletonized remains were found right smack dab where I had done my summoning the devil ritual when I was a kid. Um, I don't know why, quite honestly, in my life this never occurred to me. In my earlier life, it was probably because I was still a young practitioner at the time and still, working on my discernment and what have you. Um, and perhaps also it's something quite honestly I tried not to think too hard about because whether it was warranted or not, there was still an overwhelming amount of guilt that just ate at me whenever I would think about this. So for the most part, I tried to push that out of my mind, really not to think about it. As I mentioned, it's been on my mind a lot here lately, thus the video I posted. But I was talking to my current wife, and her family still lives up in the area, and we were planning on making a trip last weekend to go visit them. And so I told my wife that basically just to be safe, that on that trip, I wanted to drive up to Falling Rock Holler and close that portal. Um, so that's what we did. I mean, her son and daughter-in-law and her uncle, they piled into the car with us, just to go along for the ride. We parked a ways away from the bridge, and they all stayed in the car while I walked up to that bridge. Uh, really overgrown on the sides. I mean, I had to fight through like brambles to get down the bank. But when I went under that bridge, it was like stepping back in time. Exactly how I remembered it, right down to that musty smell. A lot of loose dirt, a lot of rocks. The area I'd done the ritual in, the as it got closer to the bank, the underside got smaller and smaller. And so the area I'd done the ritual in was like, closer to that, up to the other end, because it also had lower sides. I mean, they weren't really lower, but they were, the ground was closer, and that gave me some protection to the sides. I kind of squatted there before, like I'm basically on the threshold of that point for a moment. And it was almost like I was existing in two different times simultaneously. It was the first time since I was 9 that I had been back underneath that bridge. That definitely, I was so terrified when I was a kid, and that thought never entered my mind to go back under there. I figured the next day, I figured the candle had already burnt out anyway. So I just never went back under there. So this was the first time I'd returned, and it was just such a weird feeling. Um, at the same time, though, I was thinking about how I originally came to this place as basically a baby practitioner who had more intellectual curiosity than he had maybe common sense. But now I returned 54 years old, an entirely different person, seasoned practitioner, warrior of the light, and yeah, it was a very interesting feeling, and I don't know if I can do adequately describe it anymore. So before I even went into that area, I did my waters of reconciliation ritual to cleanse and purify my spirit and soul. If you don't know what that is, there's a tutorial video on the channel where you can look it up and see. And it gives like I said, tutorial. Of course, it'll give you instructions. Anyhow, I did the waters of reconciliation to cleanse and purify myself, to make sure that my intentions were pure and were only for the greatest good of the light. And only once that was complete did I cross that threshold. Now, it really was a threshold. This was late in the evening, but as I mentioned, the sides of the bridge that hung down, they got the ground progressively got closer to them. And so there was an area where the setting sun caused a straight line of light and shadow to be cast upon the ground. And so it really was like I was like crossing a threshold, which again is something that felt, yeah, I can't describe how it felt. It just felt. Um, got in there. Did some banishings, did a lot of banishings, hell of a lot of banishings. Picked up some handful of the dirt from under there. I'm not going to go into all the rituals I did under there. We don't need that level of detail. But there was a lot of rituals I did under there to basically set things right. Grabbed a handful of the dirt from the ground. And when I went back up on top of the bridge, I walked up to the far end where Reamer Road intersects with Falling Rock Holler. So that was basically a crossroads. And I just scattered that dirt at the crossroads. Then I went back. I had a rock in my pocket that I had picked up from underneath the bridge. And this bridge really isn't used by anyone other than people who are partying. There's really nothing up that way anymore once the refinery went out of business. But anyhow, had a rock in my pocket. And on top of the bridge over the area where I had done, I used it to scratch some rather large angelic and sacred seals. I let like energy from below flow into the rock, and then I went over to the side, looked down at the tributary of the Elk, and I just cast that rock into the water so that the water would wash it clean and disperse those energies. Now, this was a really emotional ritual for me. I have to say, though, I mean, I still can't say 100% whether or not I truly was at fault for the things I was talking about. But I have to say that when I came out from under there, I had a sense of atonement that was so great that I couldn't immediately walk back to the car. I had to walk up into the ruins of the refinery a little ways because I didn't want to have to explain to everyone why there's tears streaming down my face. So yeah, that's what I did last weekend. So what lessons can a practitioner take from all this? Well, one, the most obvious, of course, is, like never leave a ritual unfinished. That goes without saying. Another lesson is you should have a reason that you are doing rituals. If you are working magic of any sort, then you should have a valid reason to be doing that operation, not just to see if it will work, not out of idle curiosity or anything along those lines. You should definitely have a purpose. That is very important. One of the lessons that might not be quite as obvious is that I spent all this time when I was a kid preparing my supplies that I would need, gathering them, stashing them under my bed. It probably took about a week or so for me to gather all these supplies, but I never emotionally or psychologically prepared myself. That is why in magic, like grounding rituals and relaxation techniques and internal banishing rituals, that is why those are really important. It helps prepare you for the work at hand. Maybe if I had that level of expertise and knowledge when I was young, like then maybe I wouldn't have got scared and ran off and could have closed the ritual properly. But again, I mean, I was a little kid. Mochi, don't you start barking. No, Pomeranian just came out from under the bed that we call his apartment. Was there any other lessons I meant to mention? I mentioned, oh, yes, there was one more lesson I wanted to mention is that if you begin a operation or working ritual, whatever you want to call it, if you begin it, know damn well how you're going to close it before the time comes. I mean, it seems obvious, but that is actually something I think a lot of people miss. Closing the ritual with banishings and more groundings and purifications is just as important, if not more so, than the actual performance of the ritual. Okay, so that is my true story from my wayward youth. That is, I think, about all I got in me for tonight. I believe this video went a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but it does feel good, talking about all this, quite honestly. So anyhow, that was the story of how 9-year-old me summoned the devil with potentially unintended consequences and then returned to correct the error of my ways as a fully grown adult. So until next time, I'm just going to end this one kind of abruptly. No, I'm not going to go through my entire closing that I usually do. So just until next time, walk in peace and light, my friends.